Hello everyone, today's video is about Star Wars and my journey into Star Wars as an autistic person. Now, I've spoken about some of my special interests on my channel before. I've spoken about anime, and I feel like it might be interesting to do some YouTube videos talking about some of my special interests that I've experienced and how I got into these. And today's video is about Star Wars. I am a very, very big Star Wars fan. As you can see, I have a Jedi robe, Darth Vader t-shirt, I think, can you see it there? I have a lightsaber here. Wookiee headphones. Some action figures like this head bobbling Palpatine. Also got this soft teddy of Grogu, or Baby Yoda as he's better known. And also, if you press this, it plays the Imperial March tune. I'm not gonna let it play the whole thing, otherwise there's a risk this video might get copyrighted. I've also got all the Star Wars films on DVD as well, and some of the shows too, like the Clone Wars and Rebels. Star Wars is a very common special interest among autistic people. I have known a lot of people on the autistic spectrum who are very interested in Star Wars and the saga of Star Wars. I've come to find this is quite a common thing. Today I'm talking about how I got into Star Wars as a person who is on the autistic spectrum. Now, I was actually first introduced to Star Wars when I was very, very young. I think like maybe 4 or 5 years old or something. My brother used to try to put Star Wars on for me. At the time, I was mostly just interested in stuff like Thomas the Tank Engine, which I'd watch all the time and was very, very interested in. But Star Wars, I didn't really have any interest in. That was just the boring grown-up stuff, which I just was not interested in watching. I'd much rather watch stuff like Thomas the Tank Engine and Teletubbies. But my older brother would try to get me into Star Wars. And I think there were aspects of it I enjoyed. I found the robot, the droid C-3PO to be quite funny, and I always enjoyed watching C-3PO. And I tended to enjoy his scenes the most. And my brother would tend to point to characters like, oh look Alex, that's Darth Vader, Alex, that's Luke Skywalker, and stuff like that. But I didn't really understand the story of anything, I was too young. But I think the only part of Star Wars which absolutely traumatised me from what I can remember, which I found really, really terrifying, it probably isn't what you might think it is. It's actually the dance scene in Return of the Jedi in Jabba's palace. Basically we owned the original trilogy on VHS, on the 1997 special editions was what we owned. And when my brother put on the VHS for Return of the Jedi, we had this they had this dance scene in Jabba's palace, this musical number, and I was just not a fan of this at all. I really hated the song because at the time I was terrified of pop music. I wasn't used to hearing pop music at all, and I tended to become really afraid when I heard pop music in shops or anything like that. I would be covering my ears with my hands. I just find the noise unbearable. And the song in Return of the Jedi was very poppy, and this was no exception to that rule. I hated this song, and it made me very afraid to ever watch Return of the Jedi because I was worried about hearing that song from it. I remember The Phantom Menace coming out, and I was told, like, oh Alex, there's this new Star Wars coming out, and there's these new characters and stuff like that. And I think I started watching The Phantom Menace at my school, because I think my school wound up and started playing it. I don't think we got to see the whole thing, but we did put on The Phantom Menace, and so I did see some of the film. And later at home, I think we also continued watching The Phantom Menace. We also bought that one on VHS too. And honestly, I think I was pretty bored with The Phantom Menace at this point in time. And I was constantly looking out for C3, like at the beginning C-3PO wasn't there, and I was like, where's C-3PO? I want to see C-3PO, because he was the character which I always found the funniest and the most entertaining. However, I did enjoy Jar Jar Binks. I actually found him to be quite funny to watch, I think, from what I remember. I'm not a huge fan of Jar Jar Binks anymore, but I don't hate him. I do actually think, I know a lot of people really, really hate Jar Jar Binks. I think he's annoying, but for me, he's okay. I don't absolutely despise the character, but I'm not a humongous fan of him either. He is a bit over the top, and he is a bit overplayed as well. But I don't hate him. he's okay for me. So I did like Jar Jar, but a lot of the other scenes tended to bore me a bit. But when C-3PO finally showed up, I was really, really excited, because I was excited to finally see the Star Wars character, which I was a big fan of. So seeing C-3PO really made me super excited. I was used to him being all golden, of course, so the fact that he wasn't gold here and he had all the gold parts off him and he was like still being built, that took me out of it a bit, I think, but you know, it was still really great to see him nonetheless. And I remember a few years later when the next Star Wars episode, Attack of the Clones, came out in the cinema, and my family and I went to actually watch Attack of the Clones at the pictures in the cinema, and I actually enjoyed this a fair bit. I remember really liking... I really liked Obi-Wan Kenobi. I thought he was a cool character. I feel like at this point I was about 8 when Attack of the Clones came out. So, you know, I started to... I was beginning to appreciate it a bit more at this point. I still don't think I fully understood Star Wars, but, you know, I was more... I quite enjoyed the action to it and some of the characters like Obi-Wan Kenobi and that kind of thing. I also saw a few other Star Wars episodes again as well, and I think they did start to grow on me a bit. When I got to about 11... that's when I became super hooked on Star Wars and became a really mega big fan. I was like pretty obsessed with Star Wars and was really always interested in talking about it and watching Star Wars all the time. I'd constantly want to rewatch Star Wars. That would be like, like, you know, the way I used to rewatch Thomas, this would become the way I was with Star Wars. I just want to constantly be rewatching it all the time. When I found out that there was a new Star Wars film, Revenge of the Sith, coming out that year, I was super excited. I could not wait. I was so hyped. I think that was probably one of my most, like, of all the times I've been most excited about seeing the film, that's probably easily in my top 10 ever in my whole life. I was so excited to get to see Revenge of the Sith, especially because this was the episode where we got to find out how Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. And I was so over the moon to actually finally get to see how this happened. But then I was really disappointed to learn that it was rated 12+, so I wasn't allowed to see it at the time. I wasn't allowed to see it at the cinema, unfortunately. But I did get to see it at some point after this on DVD. I got to see Revenge of the Sith. And I did enjoy it. I enjoyed Revenge of the Sith quite a bit, quite honestly, but I was also... I think because I was so hyped to finally see how Anakin became Darth Vader, I was a bit disappointed in how it happened at the time. As time has gone by, I've actually come to really love Revenge of the Sith a lot, to the point where it is one of my favourite Star Wars films. I think I think it could be better. I don't think it's a perfect film, but I think it's easily the best of the prequel trilogy, easily. And I think one of my favourites of all of them, honestly. For a long time, we had no news of any other Star Wars films coming out until Disney bought the rights in 2012. Disney bought the rights to Lucasfilm as George Lucas was retiring, and then they announced that they were going to make a Star Wars sequel trilogy, starting with Episode 7 in 2015. And I think, like, in 2012, when it was first announced, I was 18, and I'd recently just got back into Star Wars again at this point. One of my support workers I had was super into it, and he kind of got me back into Star Wars at this point. So I was still really into it, but less. I hadn't watched it in quite a long time at that point. And at this point, I also would watch some YouTube videos talking about the special edition changes, and I actually learned that people typically didn't like the prequels that much, but I actually still really enjoyed them, especially Revenge of the Sith. But when Episode 7 was announced, I had mixed feelings towards it, honestly. On one hand, I was super pumped. I was so excited to finally see another Star Wars on the big screen. I was so hyped. However, at the same time, I was skeptical because I was kind of like, it didn't feel like it needed to exist. I felt like Return of the Jedi was the perfect ending. It was the perfect ending to the saga. It just feels like everything's wrapped up, and I mean chronologically, like with all 6 films, like episodes 4, 5, and 6 came first, but they were chronologically they're the last, or they were at the time. And I felt like Episode 6 was just the perfect ending. Like, it wrapped everything up. Even with the prequels, it felt like the perfect ending, and just with the original trilogy, it also felt like the perfect ending. So I didn't really want there to be a continuation. But since it was happening, I was excited. I was really excited to see what they did with it. And when Episode 7 came out, honestly, I did really enjoy it. It didn't disappoint me. I loved it a lot. It was very similar to A New Hope, though, the first Star Wars film that was released. It felt like it copied a lot from it. I feel like it should have been a bit more original, though. But, you know, regardless of this, I did really enjoy it. I felt like it was a great start to this new trilogy. And I felt like it had enough differences to make it stand apart from A New Hope. And I did find it to be a very entertaining ride. When the next two sequels came, however, like The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, those two I was much more mixed on. I didn't like those as much at all, in all honesty. I felt like The Last Jedi, I did not like what was done with Luke Skywalker's character. He seemed like a completely different person from what he was in the original trilogy, and he just wasn't the Luke that I knew at all, in all honesty. You know, if you've watched the film, you probably get what I mean. He acted rather out of character throughout that film. It felt very much like it was written by someone different from George Lucas. You could just tell, which it was, you know. It was written by someone else. And it also felt like they were kind of... It didn't feel like they... Like, Rian Johnson was the director of this one, who was different from The Force Awakens, and it felt like his direction... It felt like it wasn't planned out from the start, basically. His direction was very different from the direction that J.J. Abrams wants to go in, Force Awakens. When The Rise of Skywalker came out, I wasn't a big fan of that one either. I hated that they brought Palpatine back, because it completely undermines the ending of Return of the Jedi. Anakin fulfilled the prophecy by destroying the Sith and saving his son, but then, in the end, he just comes back anyway. I just wasn't really a very big fan of how they did this at all. Return of the Jedi was a much better conclusion than what The Rise of Skywalker is, and in all honesty, as much as I enjoyed The Force Awakens, I was sceptical because I felt like Return of the Jedi was the perfect ending. And did The Force Awakens even do much to justify its existence? Not really, honestly. The whole sequel trilogy doesn't really feel like it needs to exist. It kind of just feels unnecessary. It feels like a studio made them to make money, and which isn't the same way with the first 6 films. I mean, say what you will about the prequels, there is at least passion behind them. They may have had their problems, but there is passion behind the prequels, and they are made by someone who clearly has a story to tell. The sequel trilogy is not planned out at all, so I was not a fan of them. However, I have enjoyed some other things that Lucasfilm has produced since Disney had bought them. I really enjoyed Rogue One. I enjoyed Rebels, The Mandalorian. I even enjoyed the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, despite its flaws, and it did have them. It had its problems, but I still enjoyed it as a whole. I enjoyed the Clone Wars Season 7, especially the last 4 episodes. The last 4 episodes were fantastic. The previous ones, you know, they were fine, but the last 4 episodes were some of the best Star Wars I've ever seen. They were incredible. Like, this was basically the finale for the Clone Wars series, and it was so extremely satisfying, I must say. Anyway, as a whole, despite not necessarily loving every single Star Wars thing that has come out, I am a very big Star Wars fan, and have been for many years. And I would definitely say that I am most definitely thankful to George Lucas for creating this extraordinary galaxy far, far away, and all these stories that involved in the galaxy, and I'm just thankful to George Lucas for creating Star Wars, honestly. As an autistic person, I really enjoy being absorbed into this other world that is like Star Wars. You know, this other galaxy far, far away. Like, Star Wars is nothing like our world. And a lot of the time, those of us who are on the autistic spectrum, when we're stimming and going deep into our special interests, the special interest is often like a special place that an autistic person can resort to when the world is full of stress and anxiety. And I feel like that might be partly why Star Wars is so popular for those of us who are autistic. It's because the galaxy of Star Wars is nothing like our real world at all. And so I feel like this makes it for a much more exciting experience to basically, and to get absorbed into this other world. You know, I feel like that makes it enjoyable for us who are on the autistic spectrum in a lot of cases. Thank you all for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet, if you're new to the channel. Thank you for watching, and I do hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Goodbye for now.